Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. It's been an interesting day. Admittedly, not nearly as bad as I had thought it was going to be, or at least as many of us were bracing for, and that's good. But a few minutes ago, something happened, and I guess I got a little triggered. And I said, there's a number of things we haven't discussed. We were going to save for a rundown. What are we likely to see next with the Trump indictments? What motions can we expect? Who's going to try what shenanigans, and so on and so forth. So we've been trying to figure out how to frame it and do a rundown where we can talk about these things and let people know. A lot of it you can find in the mainstream media anyway. So it's like if the mainstream media is covering it, and we can't really add much, we're not going to say much. But as we were talking about that and trying to figure out what we're going to do, and we're going to do actually also a show on a lot of the defenses that Trump has been using, focusing primarily also on the emails, because that's really getting in the water again, but her emails. And that's a whole, we'll talk about it. But anyways, I just decided that I wanted to have a good conversation with somebody I trust and care about some of the shit that's going on. And so the first thing I did, well, I hit up a lot of people, actually. I went through the whole Rolodex, and I finally got to the end, and the only one that was available was 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴. 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴, how are you?
Awake now that you rudely called me and woke me up and said and cried in my ear and said that nobody else was willing to live stream with you. Could you please make you not do this alone?
You were of honesty for a second, and we'll be deleting this show later, by the way. But honesty for a second, you were the only one I called. And I was just, I think we share a number of political views, and this is In Time. This is an In Time show. So you're the only one I called, and you were available. So what happened? Well, actually, it started with a bit of a misunderstanding. I was going to stream as soon as I saw this. So Fox News put this out, and Titan sent this to me, and I think he may have gotten it right away. I don't know if he thought it was funny at first. I thought this was hilarious. I thought this was absolutely hilarious. And I think the person who put this up on Twitter thought it was hilarious. And at first view, this is fucking funny. Excuse me. And I will get to the live chat in a minute. I haven't had a chance to say hi, but I'll put this in. And you sit there and say, wannabe dictator speaks. And I was just like, oh, wow, I can't believe Fox News actually pulled the trigger on that when it comes to Donald Trump. It didn't cross my mind, like at the White House. It's like, what is Trump doing at the White House? And if you look close, that's not the White House. Now, a lot of people couldn't tell the difference, but that's not the White House. And I know that's not the White House. It didn't cross. It's white. I wasn't paying attention. It's like, they can't really be talking about Trump here. So this has been making some circles, and it's, really funny. And so I was just going to do a show. We were just going to go live, and I was going to breaking news, Fox tells the truth by accident, and we do shows like that sometimes. Just do it like 5. Just do it like a 2-minute show. We do this. Fox News called one right. It's the end of the world. The 7th seal has been broken. Everything's done. But as I was looking into it, because I was like, there's no way that can be real, right? And it's real. That's real. That's a real headline that aired not that long ago. In fact, what time did that air? Let's see, at 9. Oh, yeah, so that aired a decent, so that aired about 3 hours ago. So it's real. And The Independent had it, and so I was like, okay, well, The Independent's it's real. But then what I discovered was they were talking about Biden. And I was just like, well, then wait a minute, if they were talking about Biden. And so here's what happened, just so you know. They put up a shot of Biden talking about, I don't know what I doubt about today's events. I could probably look it up, but I didn't before airing, so I apologize. But they had a shot of Biden talking. And then they put up, wannabe dictator speaks at the White House after having his political rival arrested, which, by the way, is an extraordinarily serious fucking charge. Now, if it's Fox News talking about Trump, and again, I stopped at the wannabe dictator. That's the part I thought was hilarious, right? So I was a bit of an idiot on this one. That's insane. And they started with the shot of Biden that you see on the left, and then this came out, and it was the Fox News alert. And then they showed Trump, and they showed both of them, but they left the tagline at the bottom, and then they switched to just a shot of Trump, but the tagline remained the same. So this was not intended to be Trump. This wasn't. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting there looking at that, and I know you had said this earlier, Xandring, and I was thinking about it, which was that, Rupert Murdoch seemed to admit that Fox had gone a little too far, and they had put the gas on a lot of things that they knew wasn't true, and they got rid of Tucker Carlson, which I thought was a bit of a mea culpa, and nobody expected them to ever go even to the center, right? I mean, it's like, I'm not an idiot. They're not going to go to the center. They're going to stay to the right. But I figured this kind of thing would stop. And in my view, and I would like very much to get your opinion, but in my view, and I will put it up one more time, and then we'll take it off the center console. That's about one of the most dangerous things they have ever said, and we're going to cover some other immediate implications from this, but and what that means is Fox News is still, in my view, putting the gas on to the right, and despite the fact that it's been a pretty successful day, there was no violence. There was, Trump was arraigned, and the process is proceeding, which it's supposed to be. And by the way, he's not going to be tried by Biden. He's going to be tried by a jury of his peers, and his lawyers are going to have a hand in that selection process. But all that notwithstanding, this was staggering. And so I thought that it would be appropriate for In Time to go on air and try to unpack this. So, Xandring, what are your thoughts?
I guess it would be one thing if this was commentary opinion piece. This is on Fox News Live. They've got the little chyron there with the breaking news alert, saying wannabe dictator. It's like, okay, well, isn't that an opinion? You certainly haven't really provided any evidence. And for a mainstream news outlet to start spouting opinion as though it's fact is particularly dangerous.
Well, and you've heard me say this, I am not a fan of Fox News. I am really not a fan, but I have always said, and I've said this repeatedly, they do actually have good reporting on Fox News, and they use Associated Press, and they reference other, and if you go to the Fox News website and go to any of the actual news pages, what you will find there, and this is shocking, is real news. The problem is that really seems to be cover for what Fox News really does, which is punditry. And so when I say Fox News, nobody thinks of the actual news. They think of Tucker Carlson. They think of, Glenn Beck, Hannity, anyone else who either is now or has at some point been on Fox News, and what they say and do. The morning, the people who always meet in the morning, that's what people think of when they say Fox News. When I say CNN, the first thing you think of usually is Wolf Blitzer or God, now I can see him, but I can't with the Anderson Cooper. And, both of those guys actually do news. So it's sort of like, but when you say Fox, you think of pundits. So, but I've always given Fox the credit that they are actually a decent news source if you're just looking at the content that is branded news and that is actually specifically news. And you have to know how to make that distinction. But the key thing is they've always known how to. That's how I know it's deliberate and cynical and disingenuous, because they're careful to make sure that you can tell the distinction if you're looking. Nobody's ever claimed that Tucker Carlson was a newsman, and that's deliberate. But this is the first time I've really seen them violate that wall, and which is essentially what you said. But for me, it's just like, I'm like, whoa, that's big. In my view, that's really big.
And it's a worrisome turn for discourse in the country as well. I mean, as discourse starts breaking down, we stop talking to each other. People start to balkanize even more. It's definitely not a path towards fixing things. It's another step down the path of tearing everything apart.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant, in my view, escalation of, and yeah, okay, I'm going from just a single. Let's be clear, I'm going from a very short clip. But if the news organization the actual news organization, the news wing of Fox News, which is like 1/10 of what the organization actually has in terms of size, has ever done something like this. I haven't seen it. And the problem is there are people who do listen to the news organization, people who know the difference and who trust the news organization. And now they've said this. They have essentially said that there's no distinction between Biden and Augusto Pinochet. And it's like, wow, that's quite a claim, and that is not going to lower tempers. So anyways, I was not in the live chat. I'm now in the live chat, so I do want to catch up and see what people have to say. But yeah,
it's it's the whole issue. What do you call it? Suddenly drawing a blank on what you call the kind of old sayings that you don't necessarily know where they came from. Anyway, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's like, how do you destroy a republic? One small step at a time. It's like, we should be paying attention to the small steps. That's how we end up with, gross violations over the long term. It's not like we have I guess you could also just have a major revolution or a complete utter collapse of things that tends to end things pretty quickly too. But when you have something as durable and as long lasting as the United States, generally speaking, it doesn't go out with a bang. It usually goes out with a whimper. One small, decrepit limp towards annihilation at a time. And so it's like you have to be ever vigilant. And the problem is that it generally happens slowly enough that while people will complain and they'll notice about things, and nothing egregious enough has happened to really rile people up. I mean, it's like we know how to move essentially the Overton window around to try and move towards a goal without completely alienating everyone. And it takes a long time. This is one of the reasons why I think it's also one of the most enduring ways of doing it as well. If you actually want to make lasting change, that's kind of sort of the way you need to do it. This is the approach Martin Luther King Jr. took. It's like, look, you can't just burn everything to the ground and expect things are going to be better afterwards. It's like you need to do the hard work and slowly change people's minds, normalize things. And this can be used for good and it can be used for bad things as well. It's just like any tool. It all depends upon the intent of the user. So we have to watch for things like this. It might be just one small little thing right now where you're like, wow, I can't believe Fox News did that. And, 5 years from now, you're going to be like, holy crap, that's straight up Gestapo speak right on the news.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, and it's funny because when you look at history, you always look back and sit there and say, how did they not see this coming? And it's boiling frog syndrome. And I'm aware that that's not real, but nonetheless, it's boiling frog
biology
syndrome.
Biology kind of disagrees with that one. That's not a good one,
but people know what I mean.
Instantly understand it.
Yeah.
And also, just a quick comment for Mark Reed, asked, is the U.S. long lasting as far as empires go? The answer to that is yes. The average age of empires is about 200 years. We have made it past the average age of an empire. So.
Well, yeah. I was going to make another joke, but okay. And Titan is sending this link, and he's absolutely right. I think if you want to do anything, at least one thing you can do is start and call and tell them that you want Fox Cable taken off of your network. And by the way, my wife wanted to do that like 10 years ago. And I remember telling her, I was like, it's not a big deal. She's like, no, we're going to have Fox removed from our cable now. I was like, oh, yeah. You got to go through all this effort to do it. And honestly, I don't mind seeing it because I like seeing what the other side is thinking. It's the same reason I learned Russian, was I wanted to be able to communicate with people who are either our friends and my government was lying to me, or who were our enemies, in which case I really want to speak the language. So, yeah, that's one reason I visit Fox News is but I was like, yeah, this is a bridge too far. And so one thing at least you can do, cable companies don't give a fuck. They really don't. But they do care about the bottom line. And, it's one person at a time. So now this has led to a couple of other things that I do want to discuss. Is it going to be a huge deal going forward? I don't think so. But in terms of, I don't think we're going to get like huge protests over that. My guess is we're basically going to be the only channel. It's only going to be smaller channels who are covering it. But let's see, what was the other? And I don't have the image of this, but can I get it easily? So I guess, oh yeah, so let me So there was an interesting follow up, and if these were small channels or that were on the other side of this, that I wouldn't care so much. But what ended up happening was PBS decided to air this, and Trump was talking about. He was giving his usual rhetoric. So PBS aired the same speech. This is how the speech appeared on Fox News. This is how the speech appeared on PBS. And I actually like Twitter's done one thing right, but I think if I recall, they started doing this before Elon Musk showed up. But Twitter has started to do one thing right, which is if somebody makes a tweet that's like complete and utter horseshit, you can actually add context to the tweet. And if enough people add context to the tweet, it becomes a permanent part of the tweet. And it says context. And I've actually seen some like really horrible things said. And then below it says context. And you hit the context and then it gives the actual, you're like, yeah, they got it right. So the people who are policing Twitter are actually, that I've seen, doing a pretty good job. I don't know if that's going to expand. I have a tendency to think it won't. But I've seen it and it's been working. There was one claim that was made by someone on Twitter that I was just like, that's horseshit, and I know it's horseshit. And I was about to research and I said, wait a minute. And I look, sure enough, the context was there, hit the context, and all the research was right there and said, okay, none of this is true. Here's how, and it just, I was like, okay, it's nice to see Twitter doing something redeeming. But this was what aired on PBS, and they said experts warn that inflammatory rhetoric from elected officials or people in power can prompt individual actors to commit acts of violence. By the way, no fucking shit. I've gotten into a lot of discussions with a lot of conservatives, and it started all the way back even before Michelle Bachmann or whoever it was who actually it was Sarah Palin, I think, who would was putting up congressmen and putting bullseyes on them and saying, we got to take these guys out and we got to figure out. And I get that that's language that she uses pretty regularly and that she doesn't understand that. Yeah, she uses it because she likes guns and it's gun language, which is fine, really. But you have to be a little more careful when you're making public statements. And, anyways, so yeah, yeah, I know. I'm I was about to say sunflower, wallflower on the left that is triggered easily. That's the sort of counter argument. But the reality is, yes, this inspires violence. So that was the PBS response. And then Charlie Kirk, who I have heard of, but I don't know who he is. But I do know.
I know who Charlie Kirk is. I follow Charlie Kirk. I watch him. I follow him on Twitter. I watch a lot of his videos. I know who Charlie Kirk is.
Oh, okay. So I've heard of him, and considering that he's got 2 million followers on Twitter, I figured he was a reasonably big guy, and he has said that PBS is taxpayer funded and is now Pravda, and is calling for the defunding of PBS. Why? Because of this, and that's what he's actually put up on the. So he's put this screenshot up and said we have to defund PBS because of this. And I look at that and I look at this, and wow, apparently PBS is the problem there. And for anyone to be able to make that claim, things on the right are further than I had thought. That he can have 2 million followers and say that is a little shocking.
Yeah, I'm not really sure he usually says things that are a little bit more defensible than this. I don't really. I'm assuming he's just trying to be hyperbolic and specifically is trying to, gin up interest and clicks on what he's saying in this, because it seems eminently reasonable to say, hey, warning, inflammatory language can lead individuals into doing things they would not normally do. I mean, if you convince somebody that the world is ending and that these people really are out to get you and that they are going to kill you, then you're going to start sparking people's instincts to survive, and they may start lashing out, especially if you've managed to actually convince them of the truth of this. So, yeah, I mean, it's like that's kind of been known for a very long time. I don't know why that's such a controversial thing, and how would that suddenly make them Pravda? It's like I don't particularly care for some of the political programs that they have on on PBS, but I think that a lot of I've listened to PBS radio. They have lots of really awesome, cool things. Hey, you should definitely check out One Man's Wilderness. Awesome PBS program.
Well, and it's not Pravda just to make the. But you bring up a good point. And this is the thing, which is they've really put liberals on the defensive for when they sit there and say, "Oh, it doesn't really affect anything." And it's like, well, it really does, and everybody knows it. And it's not okay. So this is I've got now the full tweet on and this is as of just moments ago. So I refreshed the page. So that's it.
Charlie Kirk has got one of those faces. Somebody in the live chat said it looks like he photoshopped and shrunk his face, which is funny because it's actually true. He does kind of look that way, but he also has the much like oh shit, I just forgot his Michael Knowles. Much like Michael Knowles, he just has this expression, a resting smarmy face, I guess you'd call it, where it just makes you want to punch him in the face. And it's like they may be earnest and actually saying something they deeply believe, and yet they still come across as like just smug and staring down their nose at you, like you're some vital piece of dog filth that he needs to scrape upon his shoe. And it just, I want to punch some of them sometimes. Even when they're making a valid, good point that I can agree with, I'm still like, oh my God, I wish you'd just put a mask on and say that.
I completely understand and agree. I don't like it. Okay. I really don't like the fact that oftentimes success is anathema to either ethics or accurate reporting or anything like that. I mean, it just really is. And you have to there's a tension between the two. And we've all seen channels who do a lot of clickbaiting, and you sit there and say, why would they do something like that? And then take a look at their numbers, and take a look at the fact that they actually get paid significant amounts of money from YouTube, and you sit there and say, oh, that explains why they do that. Well, yeah, but why does it work? Should YouTube really be letting them? Well, YouTube isn't going through and verifying the veracity of all these things, and YouTube doesn't care. They let the community decide who they want to watch by their subscriptions and their time. And if they want to watch these guys, obviously people don't care about the clickbait enough. So you end up in this, and you end up with that in elections very much the same way, which is the politician will tell you kind of what you want to hear, and in fact try to get you riled up. So they're going to go straight into your anger, straight into what you're afraid of or worried about, because that's what's going to get you to the polls. The problem is then once they're elected, if they don't act on that, at least not to the degree that you think they promised you in one way or another, then okay, they've got a problem. And then part of that is, your politicians are out to get you. You want to be saved? Ask for me. It fucking works. And if you don't get elected, you can't do anything. So I get why, but the problem is at some point it causes the system to collapse because you can't trust anybody anymore, or you descend into violence. And it seems to me like most people are agreed we've gone too far. We're looking at a lot of violence, and then you see Fox News pull this shit. And Fox News, again, I thought Fox News fired Tucker Carlson. I really thought that was a mea culpa, and I also thought, by the way, they weren't admitting to doing nearly as bad stuff as I had thought, but like, okay, you know what? Maybe we crossed the line just a little bit, and that's sort of what I had thought, silly me, and it turns out...
We have to kind of face reality, or reality will stand up and bitch slap you at some point. It's like you can only ignore the reality for so long. And the reality is that people respond more passionately to emotional motivation, or favorably to emotional motivation, than they do to reasoned motivation. So if you can tap into people's emotional responses, usually by saying something incendiary or inflammatory, to really get that emotional response going, rather than giving a reasoned argument, people tend to yawn and move on, and it doesn't really make much of an impact when you give reasoned arguments. There's some people where it's like, I don't really care about your emotions. I want to hear what your argument is, and give me some good data. Give me give me a reasoned argument instead of an impassioned plea. It's like, but I still find several of the impassioned pleas. I mean, I listened to your gun rant, and I actually enjoy listening to that gun rant because it was an impassioned, plea of something that you believed in, and they can be very moving. I mean, look at all of the most powerful speeches given in history. They all tap into your emotional drives, your emotional side. That's what makes them powerful. That's what makes them memorable. Right. And that's simply the reality of how human beings operate. So, but you start getting into this kind of vicious cycle where, you start to become, if you overtax anything, you start to become numb to it. It starts to become, this inflamed rhetoric is now just normal speech. And how do we get that emotional response, that emotional engagement again? Well, you have to keep upping the dose. And, that leads nowhere good fairly quickly. And we need to be aware of that. And I'm not entirely sure how you break that, especially when you have, people trying to make money off of it. So, they're going to do what draws the most people in to try and make the most money, especially when it comes to online stuff. The clicks are all important. And I've seen many people that have good content, good information in their content that resort to incredibly clickbaity titles to try and draw more people in. I watched, I suddenly forgot the freaking name of the channel, Armed Scholar. That's what it is. And all he does is cover Second Amendment lawsuit cases, and he gives updates on what's going on in all of them, all across the country. All of the big ones. And the actual analysis. He's a lawyer, and he breaks down what's going on with the cases. Content's great. When you read his titles, you're like, okay, well, that's certainly not what happened. It's like, holy crap, they're so horribly clickbaity. But people have figured out that that's how you draw new eyes in. That's how you get so everybody starts doing it. I find it incredibly annoying, yet they do it because it works. And it's like, I don't know how you short circuit that system.
And the people stay, and that just kind of, and so there was a couple of new content creators I was interested in, and one of them had a show, and I saw the thumbnail for it, and I said, holy shit, that's amazing. And it was something I was really interested in. And I show up, and I realized very quickly that this was not accurate. And that's fine to some extent. I usually figure that people are going to exaggerate at least a little bit in a thumbnail. My argument is, is it defensible or not? Would a common person at least credibly think that this could be, that this is, that the way you said it is a plausible way to describe it? Doesn't have to be the best way, you know what I mean? Okay, and we had gotten this. Let's just use ourselves just to be completely honest. We have a picture of an attack that happened inside Russia by other Russian forces, and I took a look at the picture, and I don't think I should get the thumbnail if we've got it. I'll maybe bring it up, and you see a pretty large town and pillars of smoke just coming from like 8 or 9 different places. About 20 to 30% of the city is covered in smoke, which isn't a huge percentage, but for a very large town, and for a town that wasn't in a war zone, I'm like, okay. So I said that it was under massive attack. In my view, looking at that is a defensible statement. Is it really a massive attack? Well, how do you define massive? How many people actually? And it turned out not many people died. And then when you look at the numbers, it wasn't actually a lot of people going in. And but that picture, I'm sitting there going, you look at that picture, it's like, it looks massive to me. We got some pushback. Some people were like, it wasn't a massive attack. Okay, look, everything we said on air was accurate. Everything we said was that clickbait. If people feel it was, I'm sorry. I think it's arguable we shouldn't have used the word massive. And but I think it's also defensible. I think you took a look at that picture, which was a real picture of the real event. Massive was the first word that came to my mind. And if you're in that town and your town looks like that, I'd have called my mom and said, we're under massive attack. It's so for me, the bar is it defensible? Could at least a reasonable person look at that and say, yeah, it was? And if no reasonable person anywhere on the planet could agree that that was a massive attack, then we were wrong, and I'd call it clickbait. if there's a reasonable person who could look at that and say, agree or not, yeah, you could call it that reasonably, I guess, then it's justifiable. All of that to say, that's my bar. And I went to this channel, I was there like, if I polled 1 million reasonable people, none of them would say that what we're talking about now accurately reflects what, not one, nobody, can't be done. And so I ended up watching for a little while. Oh, we got a couple pictures. Thank you, Titan. I'll get that up. Thank you. I put it in, so thank you. And I ended up watching anyway because I was like, well, let's at least see what they're about, right? And I was the one who felt guilty because I was like, I kind of want to give them, I kind of want to give them a chance. We're here now, right? So let's listen in. You know, I spent, and it's the foot in the door technique. And by the time I was done, I was like, I actually kind of like these guys. I don't think that they're, great on accuracy or whatever, but sort of like me and Keith Olbermann, right? I love Keith Olbermann. I know for a fact he's full of shit. I really do. So why do you watch him? Well, because every now and then the news guy needs, some like really unhealthy sweets, the like death by chocolate kind of, it's just nothing but chocolate on top of butterfat on top of chocolate. But I watched, and then I looked at their numbers, and they had just these huge numbers. I was like, a lot of people must be so it really fucking works. All that to say, sorry, I've been talking for forever. All that to say, it really fucking works. But it's this game of chicken where the more you can inflame your base and get them really motivated, the better your chances of getting elected. But everybody knows at some point it's going to go too far and there's going to be a real problem in this country. And everybody knows we're reaching that point. But everybody thinks that the point's going to be reached at the next election, not this one. So they can keep playing that game of chicken. And it's exactly like I loved really getting into what caused the 2007-2008 collapse. Because first of all, most people don't realize how close we were to the United States not existing anymore. And that's not hyperbole. And there are some economists who say, well, that was never really going to happen. Most say, yeah, that's actually really what almost happened. And if, when was it Bernanke, I think, he did famously told Congress, famously as in we found out later, listen, you're going to pass this TARP program. And they're like, well, all these pages, we got to look at it. We're going to read it. He goes, no, you don't understand. This program passes today, which is a Friday, or on Monday, there's no economy. And like, what do you mean? Well, how bad does it get? It doesn't get bad. It's not there. You can't diagnose a patient who's gone. The economy's gone. It's over. The dollar doesn't exist anymore. And he was right. That's what they were looking at. And you take a look at how they got there, and it was all of these people knowing that what they were doing either was illegal or should have been, knowing that it was terrible for the economy and that it had to collapse at some point. But until then, they were just making so much money. They're like, I'm sure it'll collapse and wish thinking. And it's Bernie Madoff, too, right? People kept asking Bernie Madoff, how did you ever think you were going to get away with this? I didn't have to worry about that. Because that was always a tomorrow problem. And it's like, oh my, and here we are. So
that's a problem for future me. Today me is rolling in it.
Exactly. So anyways, I think you hit I think you explained it certainly much more succinctly than I did, but those are examples of that. And that's one of the reasons I love diving into it. People sit there and say, why on earth would you dive into the economics? So it's like, no, it's a human thing. There's nothing more human.
Anjur pointed out, it's like, when I talk about impassioned pleas and speeches, it's like talking about a sermon. Sermons are done in the exact same way and for the exact same reasons. It's like we have known for a very long time across all of humanity, we have known what motivates people or how to motivate people. And it's just at some point it can get, in order to keep the same kind of level of passion going for something, you have to up the ante at some point, because you start getting you start getting inured to the effects, and so you have to up the dosage in order to feel the same kind of emotional things. You can only maintain high levels of emotion for a certain amount of period. So
you and I have had this discussion before, right? I have talked with a lot of people that in my view are racist, and I think if I were to say this is a racist person, speaking of defensible statements, I think 99 if not 100 reasonable people would all agree that person's a racist. Having said that, I don't call people racists. I really hate doing it, and I don't do it as a rule. And the reason is because you shut down the conversation. Now, if you don't want a conversation with them, fine. I understand that wanting a conversation with them is usually a pretty bad fucking idea because they're not usually reasonable people to talk with. But if you want to have a conversation, if you want to try to make things better, having that conversation, I wish I'd queued up. I may have it. Oh, if I have it queued, I'm going to play it. Having that conversation takes much more work and yields fewer like endorphin rewards in the short term by a lot than sitting there saying you're a racist, homophobic, son of a, whatever. And all of those things could very well be true, probably are. Then again, they sit there and say I'm unpatriotic and I'm this and that. They're saying that because I hate America. I want to give sympathy to the terrorists. That was one that triggered me. I said, let's understand these terrorists. Oh my God, you want to give therapy to the terrorists. I'm sitting there going like, have you ever read Sun Tzu? He's going to tell you the first thing to do is to understand them. This shouldn't be controversial, but it was a way to amp the rhetoric. And it is never, if doing it the right way were easy, everybody would always do it and these problems would be solved by now. We'd probably have a whole host of new ones. But it's not just Martin Luther King Jr. One of my favorites, and I had this discussion. I had this discussion with somebody actually. I love this guy, a great guy. But one of his views is that racism is so bad in this country that you can't have discussions with these people, and it's not going to get these people. Funnily enough, it's not going to get fixed until there's so much violence that both sides decide that they want it to stop. And that does happen from time to time. And that's what stopped the Civil War was fatigue over the fighting. It wasn't that one side decided the other was right. They're both like, wow, this was a really bad fucking idea. And, well, I shouldn't say that because one surrendered to the other. But they could have kept going. And they all came to the conclusion at the end. I mean, what changed really after the Civil War? And people are sitting there going, how much has my day-to-day life changed? And yet we went out killing each other because of exactly what you said. The rhetoric just got so powerful. Everyone just thought everything was so big and so important. And so this friend of mine had said that it's not going to change until there's all this. And he really believes that. And he's preparing for that. And that's not always wrong, but that's also the kind of attitude that's most likely to cause it. And the answer that and he said, okay, Nick, how would you convince Mitch McConnell? If I was in a room talking to Mitch McConnell, how would I change him around and get him to be an awesome guy? I wouldn't. I'd fail. I'd try anyway. And I'd do it the right way anyway because other people are watching. And they're judging my views and my values based on what I project. So I would absolutely try knowing I'm going to fail. And I fail a lot of the time. But then again, it's an Overton window. And it's Martin Luther King Jr. And it's, the funny thing is, so because I can't flip Mitch McConnell, that means we're destined for a race war or a gender war or whatever. Let me ask you this. What does it take to shift a sheriff who sicks dogs on a 7-year-old black child? I guarantee you Martin Luther King never changed that guy. But he changed the country. If he can change the country, it doesn't fucking matter that I can't change Mitch McConnell. I don't have to. But we have to stop the lying. And we have to stop calling and saying all these terrible things about absolutely everybody. I have never met a racist, or at least someone who in my view was racist, who thought they were racist. And that's not entirely true. I've met one or two who actually knew said, I'm racist. And I was like, if you're proud of it, you're not racist in the same way that I think you are. I'll just tell you that right off the bat. But anyways, it doesn't work, and it's much easier and more gratifying to say, I'm right, they're wrong, they're all assholes, and if it comes to violence, so be it. But that is a real dangerous attitude. And it's troubling.
Well, on a slightly more positive note, I drive across this country, month in and month out. I go from coast to coast. I go into Canada. Don't go to Mexico because I'm racist and screw all the Mexicans. But
I can't believe you just said, "Oh God, where's my phone? I have to find my phone."
I've got to give some sort of. I got to give some sort of clippable. Yeah.
Oh God. Well, since you're not actually on YouTube anywhere other than this, you're gonna
The insurance requirements to go down into Mexico are horrendous. That's why I don't go to Mexico.
Yeah.
Wait.
You know why the insurance is so high in Mexico, right? I'm just saying anyway.
Because of those evil actuators.
Actuaries. That's exactly what I was going to. I want to show two things. The first one we've showed before, and if this is the audio may be echoed in the live in the audience. If it is, let me know. I will play it again because you deserve to hear it. This was previous? This was Daryl Davis. His ad as he was running for Congress. Let's give it a shot.
Democrats like to say that no one needs an AR-15 for self-defense, that no one could possibly need all 30 rounds. But when this rifle is the only thing standing between your family and a dozen angry Democrats in Klan hoods, you just might need that semi-automatic and all 30 rounds.
So that was one of the more surprising ads for Congress that I have ever seen. All right, and then let's let me see. What was the other one? I didn't have the other one queued up. The other one is okay. Let's Daryl Davis, and I don't think I have the actual Daryl Davis. And this is, if I recall, it's pretty explicit language. Daryl Davis is a musician from New Orleans, and he heard, was it Duke? I forget. He was the Grand Wizard of the KKK speaking and talking about how and why he hated black people. And Daryl Davis said, how can he say that? He hasn't even met me. How can he? So Daryl Davis actually got a meeting set up with this man, Grand Wizard of the KKK, and said, I want to talk to him. And he decided not to tell him that he was black. And so they went and had the meeting, and his description is insane. It was contentious. At one point, they all did nearly shoot each other when the ice melted on the, they had a glass, they had wine, and the ice melted enough that the wine shifted and the thing fell over, and everybody reached for their weapons. He had a bodyguard and the whole 9 yards. But he decided he wanted to learn more about Dave. Oh God, I've forgotten the name of the KKK guy, but he wanted to learn more, and he started interacting with the guy and interacting on his level and being honest about, look, I don't condone your views, but I want to learn who you are. And they started getting to know each other, and he started inviting him to Klan rallies. So Daryl Davis would come down to Klan rallies and have barbecue with all the Klansmen, and it caused a whole bunch of tension. And eventually what the Klansmen realized was that he liked Davis better than he liked the people who he was holding Klan rallies with. And after 2 years, he surrendered his robes to Daryl Davis. And Daryl Davis has sort of practiced this technique of just getting to know Klansmen. And I forget how many robes he's collected, where Klansmen will sit there and say, oh, yeah, I hear you collect robes. Well, I'll talk to you, but... And then years later, and it takes years. It's not, and people sit there and say, well, that's not, what is he really doing? I'm sitting there going, think about the people that these Klansmen would talk to and how many people have you, quote, deconverted or whatever, just by sitting there using angry rhetoric. And he doesn't, he engages with them on a human, and it isn't fucking easy. And I know it sounds like wish thinking. History. And most of the time, it's the only fucking thing that works. Everything else is sort of, either hit or miss or temporary. And the only thing that affects change on a long term. Anyways, this is Daryl Davis. So let's play this.
With a Klansman in a robe and hood. And of course, they'll have that visceral reaction like, what the hell is going on here?
It is something we never see. A black man attending KKK rallies where crosses are burning and racist views are being spewed. Some of their beliefs are that African Americans, black people, are born with smaller brains, that we are inherently lazy, we are inherently prone to crime, raping people, especially white women. Despite that offensive ideology, Daryl Davis has spent decades befriending members of the Ku Klux Klan.
How do you talk to someone when someone's calling you the N-word?
Because you take the higher road. You know who you are.
There is one question Daryl has repeatedly asked members of the Klan.
How can you hate me when you don't even know me? They've never had an answer that they can come up with that justifies how they can hate me.
His conversations with Klansmen resulted in something Daryl never expected.
I would find things in common. And as I began to build on those commonalities, the things that we had in contrast as trivial as skin color began to matter less and less. And as I built upon those commonalities, a relationship was formed.
In the last 30 years, Daryl says 200 members across the country have left the KKK as a direct result of his involvement.
He was very vicious, very violent, and very racist. But at the very end, he said that he respected me.
Many of those who've left have given Daryl their robes and hoods. He keeps them in his home. It's a journey that is documented in the film Accidental Courtesy.
I consider Frank to be my friend.
I consider Daryl to be my friend as well.
What do you think about the current tension in America?
The culture of racism existed long before Donald Trump, long before President Obama, long before Bush or Clinton or whoever. We, American citizens, are to blame for fostering that culture of racism. Talking about race in this country has been taboo for a very long time. People don't want to talk about it.
Daryl believes the only way to end racism is to confront it head on.
Progress is made when you give somebody a platform where they can express their views, even if you don't agree with them. When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. It's when the talking ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence.
Gina Silva.
I've got several clips. What I dislike about this one is it doesn't show. It was actually, was it PBS? I think it was PBS. I think it was Frontline. Followed him around for like a month, and they took the cameras to the Klan rallies, and oh my God, lots of guns and fires and barbecue and all sorts of interesting stuff, and some fights breaking out over the fact that he was there. Again, it was a Grand Wizard who had invited him, and presumably as the Grand Wizard had the right to invite anybody he wanted, but things got crazy. And anyways, and there's a comment in the live chat, and I get that. And there's another. So this was actually two parts, because the other one was a whole bunch of people saw Daryl Davis when he first did this, and two activists in the Black Lives Matter movement decided that what Davis was doing was counterproductive, and that you cannot have conversations with people like this, and that to do so makes matters worse. So they I'm not, and I don't remember, it's been a while since I've seen this, I don't remember what the harassment was, but they essentially started harassing Davis, and they started protesting him, and you want to know what he did? He took him out to lunch and said, are you guys mad at me? And said, yeah, we're fucking livid because you are turning monsters into people and you're treating them like people first. And he's just like, okay, and that makes me a monster? I said, well, actually, yeah, because you're betraying your people and people who are suffering just like you. And he said, well, wait a minute. What have you been doing to help? And they talked about Black Lives Matter, and they talked about protests, and they talked about, he said, okay, that sounds like great stuff. You know, and what has it done? How are you engaging? What's going on? Like, well, it hasn't done anything yet, but it takes time. Well, okay, I get that. But here's what I'm doing, and here's why it works. Why don't you come with me? I'll go with you to some protests, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see what we do, and we'll have a great time. And then you come with me, and do it. They're like, no fucking way. 6 months later, another interview with him, and they had gone with him, and they decided he was right. And by the way, it's not, and I guess I'll tell you once, I know I'm ranting a lot. I was triggered. I wanted to do this show. I got into another argument once because I was at a protest, actually. I was protesting, I think it was the Second Iraq War. And somebody came up to me and was just like, oh my God, you're a fucking... what is it? A pussy pacifist who yada yada. I don't remember what the insults were, but I laughed my ass off. I'm not a pacifist. Wait, what do you mean you're not a pacifist? I'm not a pacifist. We have to engage in war. We have to engage in violence. I wish we didn't. It's the nature of things. It's actually, on some level, if you think about it, I think the nature of all things, stars siphoning gases and materials off of other stars is in some ways an act of violence. I'm aware that there's limited resources, and sometimes the only way to get what you need is violence, especially against people who would try to end your life. So yeah, the Iraq War wasn't that. So that's all I'm saying. And he's like, okay, well that's a nice hunky-dory view that we shouldn't use our power, military power. And I told him roughly a lot of the same things that I had said here, and I said, how far does compassion get you? It gets you much further than people have a tendency to think. And he said, well, okay, is that what you would have used against Hitler? World War II, German armies are coming. If you had been in charge, we'd have gotten wiped out because you'd have said, let's sympathize with Hitler. I said, no, I'd have said, we send everybody over. I'd have engaged faster than the U.S. did. And Roosevelt wanted to go in much sooner, but couldn't because there wasn't support for it. He'd have found me supporting it. We had to. There was no other way to stop him, obviously. But here's an interesting question. What if after World War I, instead of saying Germans are horrible fucking people, they just propelled us into this huge war, we are going to just put so many fines, taxes, wipe out their economy all the way back to the fucking Stone Age. That's what we did, and it probably felt justifiable, and it actually really was justifiable. But that's how Hitler came around. Hitler came around because German pride had been so smashed, and they felt like pariahs to absolutely everybody, that somebody coming up and saying, hey, you're not a pariah. You're a human being. And coming up and trying to get pride for Germans again, they were willing to ignore everything else he ever said. That's how Trump was elected. There wasn't a single stupid, idiot conservative who took a look at a man who shits on a golden throne and says, yeah, he's like me. No, they're not that stupid. The liberals who come to me and say any conservative who voted for Trump is an idiot because they think he represents them. No, they don't. They say it. They don't believe it. None of them believe it. They're not that fucking dumb. But he tells them it's okay to be them. And he really pisses off the people they hate, the liberals. That's it. They want some pride. Because they're sick of being told they're all racist and they're all... Whether it's true or not doesn't actually really matter. If we had treated Germany at the end of World War I The same way we treated Germany at the end of World War II, that we treated Japan at the end of World War II, there wouldn't have been a World War II. World War II was caused by our need to punish Germany for what they did. And the argument was, if you don't punish them, if you don't make them pay, they'll do it again. Only it turns out if you punish them and you make them pay, they will find a way to do the same back to you. Just a question of how long. Nothing I'm saying is a path to permanent peace. It really isn't. But it's a path to a better world than where we are now. And in the long, slow arc of history, human life expectancy is longer than it's ever been. We're happier. There is actually less violence and so on and so forth. But that's been by increasing our empathy and ability to communicate even with people who are fucking shitty people. That's it. I don't know. Any thoughts?
I think that I do think that approach of, actually treating other people as, human beings and not just calling them a bunch of derogatory terms and listening to their points and, using a reasoned argument, to engage with their points is in the long term probably more effective. I mean, I think we've seen evidence that it's more effective, but it's certainly not particularly fulfilling, especially in the moment, in the now. It's like, let's grant all of the arguments for genocide of trans individuals, of the LGBTQ plus. I don't know what the rest of the acronym is anymore. Let's grant all of that. And so what is the response to that? It's like, well, I mean, you either listen to them, engage with them, and don't just call them, oh my God, you're a horrible human being for wanting to do this. Well, you run the risk of the genocide continuing, and there's no real action. And so the people around you are going, look, this isn't doing anything. Nothing is actually happening because they actually want some actions to take place. So it even though I think that it probably in the long run would be more effective to implement, say, you just showed the clip of him and I suddenly forgot his name.
Daryl Davis.
Yes. Employ his tactics or Martin Luther King's tactics in this discussion, where it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot actually going on. Not a lot of things seem to be changing. That's incredibly frustrating for people because they're like, no, this is a serious matter and we need to actually do something about this. I don't know. And in some instances, doing something about it is absolutely justified. And it's the difficult part is when is it actually justified? And if you want to just get rid of the people that you think are absolutely horrible people, it's like your goal is, look, they just need to be eliminated so that we can have a better world. Well, then yeah, you want to push people towards action to let's just eliminate this segment of the population because they have bad ideas, they're horrible people, and they're causing the harm to another swath of people.
Well,
that's the way that you do it.
And I do think that there's a number of people, especially politicians in power, especially south of the Mason-Dixon line, that absolutely want to end trans people, which is interesting because you can't actually do that. There will always be trans people, and I suspect if you wiped out every trans person alive today, in the next generation, there's going to be trans people again. And it's a natural state of, I don't think you're going to get rid of it like that. But I think there are people who are very interested in doing that. But that notwithstanding, there was a comment on the live chat that I'm underestimating bigoted people. I'm not. I'm absolutely not. And the way I know that is what I said earlier. The average bigoted person today, just the average. Let's take the average bigoted person in Alabama. Are they better or worse than the average bigoted person when Martin Luther King Jr. was in Alabama? And I think one of the things Martin Luther King Jr. really hated was being thought of as a saint and being thought of as a really special person. And it wasn't because he was humble that he hated it. He hated it because it's a way for people to say, I don't have to try to use compassion or do anything like that because I'm not a saint. I could never do that. He didn't want to be put on a pedestal because then that meant people would think that what he did was really that hard. And actually it was really that hard, but because it's hard, not because it takes a saint. I don't think I am. And the reason is because the average bigoted person today is not where it was in Alabama at the time that he was there, at the time that people were disappearing off the street in numbers that were just staggering. At a time where you really could easily murder a black person and get away with it. And if it worked then, no. And, but, it's also not cathartic to do it that way. If you want to get good numbers on a high YouTube channel, the easiest way to do that is to say they're out to get you, folks. They really are. And, there is truth to it. They are out to get you. And that's one reason why for trans people it's so important to talk about a trans genocide, because there really is a genocide going on in that sense. It's not in the same sense as Auschwitz or what I think is happening in Ukraine, but it's a step away from that. It ain't that far from that, and that's a credible reach, especially if you're trans. It's like, that's a credible reach. It's not a credible reach in Massachusetts, but there are states in which that's a credible reach for the near future, especially depending on who gets into the White House and so on and so forth. So, I see why it's important to illustrate that. But and now I've forgotten how was I? I don't know. Well, I'm starting to get tired, so I'm ranting even.
And the only reason I even brought that example up was because it was like I didn't disagree with them. All I said was we should be cautious about using such loaded terms. And instead of explaining to me why they justified it as a genocide and saying, no, these are the reasons why I think that we should, they just attacked me as a person. Not knowing a damn thing about me, they just attacked me for saying that I think that we should exercise a modicum of caution. This is a pretty loaded word. And when you say it, it tends to engender visions of Auschwitz, for example. It's like maybe we should be a little more circumspect in how we're doing this. And instead of engaging in an actual talk saying, no, this is why we're doing this, this is the case for it, which I had already admitted that there probably is a good case for this qualifying as genocide, but that we should be cautious. And they just attacked me. They just called me every horrible name in the book, not knowing a damn thing about me, not knowing anything about my history. And it's like, I don't know. It's like maybe an argument here instead of just name calling. I don't think what I said was imprudent.
I will say this. The very first time I ever heard the idea that there's a trans genocide, I was like, is that really, defensible? And I had people who are friends, and they sit there and say, yeah, Nick, let's talk about how and why. And then they talk about it. It's like, oh, shit. Yeah, that's you got it. You got it. There's no question. And I get how and why. And I was just like, okay. But it's asking questions is a great weapon used by a lot of people to try to undermine arguments. And they'll sound like they're genuine, and they'll sound like they're willing to be on your side. I'm just asking questions. Let me ask a few. I'm just asking questions. Let's just talk about what does this mean and what does that mean? And they have no interest in listening to the answers. What they're interested in doing is trying to find a way to undermine or attack your argument using very disingenuous methods. This happens a fucking lot. But what good and reasonable people have then done is said, anyone who asks questions, you shut them down and you attack them. And that is the wrong solution, because it turns you into that which you despise, and it gives them more ammunition, because now when you're right, you're still not willing to talk to people about it. because you're afraid they're disingenuous. And so the disingenuous people shut down your ability to communicate with other genuine people who just don't understand because you don't trust anyone anymore. That's a huge part of the end goal there. If they don't succeed in shutting you down, fine. If they succeed in getting you to be cynical and say, I'm just going to go after anyone who says anything that sounds bad, they've made a step in their direction. And again, I know I'm making it sound like I think this is easy and it's just like, oh, hey, just trust everybody. No, it's not fucking easy. And you get fucked a lot of times. And you put your faith in someone being willing to have that conversation a whole bunch of times. But sometimes it works. And that I can tell, it's the only thing that works more often than the alternative, which is to be pissed at everybody all the time and shoot everybody down and go up and say that Biden is a wannabe king who's arresting No. But they feel that's justified. And I understand why I do. I understand why they feel it's justified. Anyways, we did get a super chat. So we don't always get super chats on this kind of show. So, Stephen Walsh, $10. Let's wage a campaign of history. There is awesome value in remembrance. There is an ecocide or total destruction. Ecocide. Thank you. Ecocide. And then P bought to. I know I'm getting this wrong, and I'm probably going to be glad I got it wrong. P bought the Hulu. $10. Yes. Hence, when you find yourself in such a conversation, you simply call out their bullshit. You show them their logical fallacies in their comments. And I'm a big fan of that that methodology. That doesn't work necessarily nearly as often as I'd like. What I like about I am an anti-theist. I don't often say that, especially on this show, because there are Christians who like this show and they don't like atheists, let alone anti-theists. Now, I have a lot of anti-theist friends who think that you should go around calling out all Christians on their bullshit and that God isn't real and yada, yada, yada. And I have very serious problems with organized religion. I think if you didn't have this cult I don't want to just say outright cult, but if you didn't have this belief in God, the Catholic Church wouldn't have been able to justify all of the terrible things, and I mean god-awful things that they have done and covered up, because praising God and glory to God is more important than bringing justice to pedophile priests. And I can see how they got there. If I was in their shoes, I might have thought the same thing too. And so I'm like, well, the only thing that kind of enables that is those kinds of structures. So I object to those kinds of structures. Now, that doesn't mean I try to tear them down at every opportunity, but I have very strong objections to them. But a lot of people that I meet sit there and say, well, the way you destroy them is by going out and attacking every theist that you meet and everybody who supports the church. And I was like, no, boo, that's not a good idea. But for all my objections, and we did our show on Martin Luther King Jr., I'm not convinced he was a believer. I think he may have been an atheist. And I know for people who don't know anything about his history, that seems like an awful stretch because he was a fucking reverend. But I sort of vaguely make the case for it in our video on him. And I don't need him to have been an atheist. If he was I had assumed for most of my understanding of him that he was probably very deeply religious. I now think he may not have been. It doesn't matter. I'm perfectly cool with. I always assumed that he was just a devout Christian, and that's great. But this idea of compassion that he claims to have gotten through Christianity, it was his study of history that brought him to the conclusion that it was going to work. And he used Christianity as a means of deploying it. But, oh Jesus, now I'm probably getting too tired to continue threads like this, so I should probably start to think about wrapping it up, and I know everybody's. And I appreciate people putting up, perhaps it was that I had a lot I felt I needed to process, and I decided I wanted to process it with our audience watching and with Xandering here helping me out, so I appreciate, I appreciate it. But, it was a point about compassion. Despite the Christians who truly believe in compassion, and I don't think you have to love your enemies, at least not in that sense. And I don't, I'm not saying you have to forgive everybody or you have to do this or that, but there's far more to be made when you proceed from a place of genuine compassion than you do from anger and hostility. And that's even when you're facing anger and hostility. That's even when the answer to your compassion is going to be fire hoses and dogs. And again, it doesn't work in absolutely every case. I'm not trying to say that it would have worked against Hitler or anything like that. But it is an irrefutable fact of history that it works, and it works well. And it's once those of us who feel motivated to have made something of our lives and gone out and done something, do you think about the people who pained you, who hurt you, and who did something to you as a motivation? There are a few of us who do that. I was told I couldn't be this or that, and my dad spit at me and this and that, and so boom, I made myself out of something to show him. That does happen. Those people are usually cold, bitter, and broken. The people who do otherwise and make something of themselves usually are fed by somebody that loved them and encouraged them. And it's not that I won't be moved from this hill because I'm stubborn. It's because I'm right. All right. Any other thoughts before we get going?
From our much meandering talking about Fox News and saying want to be dictator all the way through.
It's been
how
an
do we
interesting
change
show.
people's minds?
Well,
over the long term.
Here's the funny thing that
what a meandering.
I know. Well,
meandering trip.
You and I often will chat and shoot the shit and vent ideas around. We don't usually air it live. But sometimes we have like a really good, like we just talk about shit and we sort a whole bunch of stuff out. We're like, damn, why wasn't that like you had proposed? I think this may be a great idea, which is from now on, every time you and I talk, record the fucking thing. And then just if one of them is great, like we should do a show on this. No, we should just take the recording, put our pictures up, smacking it on YouTube. But I don't usually talk this much. It was a lot today. And
and we're both verbal processors, so it's like we'll try different things out, and it's like I'll sit and think about some things and think about them, and then it's like, okay, I need to talk about this. It's like I need to take this position, I need to defend it, and see if it holds any merit. If I, almost like how do I feel making this argument? Does it hold up? Do I think that this is right or not? And so it's like. It can sometimes be really difficult to find another verbal processor that'll work through things with you, especially when it's like you may not be taking a particularly great point here, but it's like I need to understand this, so I'm going to try and make the case for this, and work through what are the arguments, what are the counter arguments, what does this actually hold up or not. So sometimes it's just like there's been a lot of things going on. I'm trying to process. It's like this is like bad, and how is this bad, and it can get very meandering. It can get a little bit dicey. It's like you can often end up saying things where you're like, I don't necessarily think this is true, but here we go. Let's try this. And a random person just watching you go through this process would be like, wow, you're kind of a bad person because you're making the case for some pretty nasty things. And it's like I'm trying to get to the truth at hand here. I'm trying to get to the actual arguments. I'm trying to find out, what is a good. It's like I'm going to try and make the best argument I can for it. And if I can finally come down with the best arguments, what are the actual counters for that? It's like, you're going to hear me talk about some pretty terrible things as though I believe them and that they should. This is the way things should be happening. That's not necessarily true.
Well, and that's one of you and I had a conversation a while back. I want to say this was like 6 months ago or something like that. That sounds about right. So we were just talking. No, it had to be longer than that. But at any rate, we were talking, and I had just said this. And I don't even remember what it was, but I was just like, I said, what? I think X, Y, and Z. I forget what it was. And you really think that? I said, what? I do. And I just started to defend it. And you're like, that's insane. I said, that really is insane. I don't believe any of that shit. It's just like, wait, I was just like, no, I tried that on for a minute and it just didn't work. I was like, I can't believe, I'm glad that was not recorded live. It was, well, I think verbal processors, it's a whole bunch of hot takes and just throwing out hot take after hot take after hot take. It's like, which one do I think, which one suits me? And nonverbal processors just manage to do that in their head without having to say it. But it's the old expression, how do I know what I think until I hear what I say? All right, so we've got, we did get another super chat. Stephen Walsh, $10, empathy and compassion, great stream, and staying up late, from the land of midnight sun. Thank you. Well, I genuinely, appreciate that. I don't, there's been so much, ranting. I don't know if what I'm saying sounds cogent anymore. So I apologize. I'm tired and we've been covering a lot. So, let me get to business for 1 minute. Aside from tomorrow, we're going to have a show. We're going to have Jason Torn and I want to say Mark. I don't know. You see, that's how bad my brain is. I can't even figure. Let me go. Got his name. I want to say Mark. But we're going to be discussing just some astonishingly bad climate numbers coming out of China, and I think it was Asia, and it was just really bad. And so we're going to talk about what it means and what they think about it, and the general consensus, as far as I've talked about already. Like, well, we knew it was coming. Yes, these are really bad. No, they're not a shock. We're sorry that we're seeing this. We don't want to see this. It's like, holy shit. But on the flip side, it's like, but we did know this was coming. So we're going to discuss that. And then there was a lot of questions about what's going to happen next in the trial, and obviously, we don't know. I do think the general consensus is, and I haven't done an update recently, so forgive me if any of this was the wheel started rolling. I don't believe they have. I don't know if they've done pretrial motions or not. It was kind of crazy, but well, I have zero doubt in my mind that the prosecution is going to ask for a new judge. This judge strikes me as being obviously biased and not one you want to work with, and getting her overruled and working through the shenanigans of trying to getting a functioning trial out of this. You want her removed ASAP. I suspect that's going to happen. The other thing that I think is going to happen is that there's going to be a charge of prosecutorial misconduct, and they're going to just try to have either a not a default judgment, a summary judgment, and throw the case out because of prosecutorial misconduct. I haven't seen any evidence that would warrant sustaining that, but it doesn't hurt to try, and maybe they've got something I don't know about. I've heard they feel that somebody did something. I don't know, but. So we're going to see a lot of the pretrial stuff. If anybody's really curious about what the next 6 months are going to look like, I'm going to tell you. The other concern was, well, if he gets into office, can he pardon himself for this? Yes, he can. I don't think he would, because it's too much trouble. The president of the United States is the chief executive in this country. So what that means is that they determine what cases are tried or aren't, and they don't go through with every single case, but they can direct anybody in the executive branch to prosecute certain cases or not. And that's why every now and then, Obama said, we are not going to prosecute people who are not documented here in the United States. We're not going to do that. And there's a reason. And that's part of his job, is to determine how resources are allocated. And that was the decision that he made. Trump is entirely within his rights if he is reelected. I don't think it should be legal, but it is. It is within his purview to call up the Justice Department and say, hi, I noticed you're prosecuting a guy named Donald J. Trump, and I am instructing you to end the prosecution. And they must, period, end of discussion. That's what the Constitution says. He's the chief executive. That's their job. If they don't, he fires them, replaces them with someone who does, and that's, unfortunately, that's within it. So he ends the case. Georgia will indict him. They will indict him soon. I am hoping we are looking at days or weeks on that. I suspect we are looking at days or weeks on that. He cannot pardon himself for that. He cannot. So yeah, Still more tired than I thought. He cannot pardon himself for that, and he cannot tell the Justice Department not to do it because it's not his Justice Department. It's the Justice Department of Georgia. So he's in trouble in Georgia. He will be hit with some charges that are actually more serious than these. Now, I think these should be the more serious charges because I think this is like, okay, this is maybe treason, maybe selling nuclear secrets, undermining the security of the entire country. I think that's a problem. But in Georgia, it's election tampering, election fraud, all of these, and most of them carry terms longer than the federal ones that he's being charged with. If he is convicted in Georgia, he cannot be on the ballot in Georgia for anything, including president. He cannot win the presidency without Georgia. And if he does win, he cannot pardon himself for the Georgia crimes. He cannot get the Georgia crimes off. He has no say on the Georgia crimes. And it looks to me like the evidence in those are even stronger than in this case. So this is just the beginning. Things are going to get worse for him. They're going to get worse for him reasonably quickly. This case, I think, has enough meat that they can hook him on it. I think he's going to get nailed. I think his attorneys are very crystal clear. They're aware and have been trying to get the prosecutors to play ball, and the prosecutors aren't interested because they know how good a case they've got. That's what this looks like to me. We've talked about that, but so if you're interested in understanding where this is going, he's going to be in a lot more trouble, and it's actually going to be in the state of Georgia by state crimes, and a state prosecution, not the federal one. And so he does have outs on this. He'd have to win. It looks like he's going to be the nominee. That's what people are saying. I wouldn't guess this far out, but DeSantis has no way. DeSantis will not be the nominee unless something truly kneecaps Trump, and clearly this isn't capable of doing it. But DeSantis does not have the momentum or the ability to gain that momentum without some event that changes it. If everything just proceeds as a normal campaign, it is impossible at this point for DeSantis to reach the point where he could be the nominee. It cannot happen. There has to be something cataclysmic. And the cataclysmic things happen, the September, October, November, whatever surprise, they do happen. But short of that, he cannot be the nominee at this point. So you're looking at Trump getting a second nomination or being the Republican nominee and going through all this again. So we'll see. Let's see. I got a few comments. Got a few. Yeah, Trump is raging on Truth Social. So there you go. We'll see. I don't know. Thank you all. And thank you to the audience for their patience. I would thank his Andring for his patience, but he does this all the time where we just sit and shoot the shit about things, and the two of us sort of workshop things. And like I said, I had thought it. I'm going to tell one more story because, I can't. I'm what's called a big thinker. So what that means is it's not that I think big, awesome thoughts. It's that I have to start from the big and work to the small. So if somebody says, "Gee, Nick, I heard you got into a fight with somebody on Tuesday. What happened?" I said, "Oh, yeah. Okay. In order for me to tell you about Tuesday, I got to give you a little background. So let me start at the beginning. First, the earth cooled, and then the dinosaurs came. And it's just sort of like, okay, so that's how I process information."
It's called From the Beginning of Time Descriptions.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I love that's actually exactly how, if you ever see the movie Adaptation, that's actually how that guy thinks, and that actually happens in the movie. He's like, he's writing a script, and he realizes the only way to write a script about orchids is to start at the beginning of time. It's just like, okay. It's like, I totally get that guy. But so let's see. But when you're tired, then it's a worse. My father. I grew up in the 80s, so people were building bomb shelters because nuclear bombs were going to go off and kill us all. The Russians had their fingers on the button. The U.S. had their fingers on the button. My father lived through, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was there watching as the world was days, at one point about 4 hours away from ending. And I remember there had been some kind of nuclear crisis. I don't think this was when Pakistan released control of nuclear weapons into the field. But that was a scary one too, because Pakistan and India arguing over Kashmir. It had become a hot war, and I think it was Pakistan that released control of nuclear weapons to their generals. And the question was, did they really do this? And if they did do this, was it with a wink and a nod to the generals, like, hey, don't really deploy those weapons? And even if it was, or the general's actually going to, I was like, that was cray-cray. I don't think it was that one, but it was something along those lines. And I told my father, I was a little kid, and I was terrified. And he had said that when cannons were first built, the man invented the first cannon. A couple of interesting things happened. First of all, nobody thought it was a worthwhile weapon, and it was turned away. And I forget who it was, whether it was the Turks or whoever, but somebody sat there and said, hey, wait a minute, this is actually a really useful thing. I started using cannons to tear down walls and hit fortified positions. So they weren't being used on ships. They were just bringing the cannons into sieges, and all of a sudden they could break into any fortified position. And people freaked out, and they said, it's the end of the world. And I was just, really? Because of cannons? Like, yeah, because they basically thought there'd never be any such thing as a fortified position again. So that's it. The world's over. So all the writings of that time are like, the world shall end in fire, and that fire will be a cannon blast. And it's like, it's like, so, yeah, I'm scared of nuclear weapons, but people have said that this weapon or that weapon is going to be the end of the world for a very long time, and it hasn't happened yet. Now, that's always, of course, true until it's not. But so, I sit here and say, guys, we're looking at an American civilization that's tearing itself apart, and it's, got me very, very concerned. And I'd like to see us turn ourselves from the brink. And I really do think that this country is worth it. And I think we as a people are worth it. And I think we can do better. But it feels like it's really on the brink. But every time I start to worry about that, I remember my father talking about cannons. And hopefully things aren't as bad as they look where I'm sitting. And hopefully that they really are on the mend. And when Tucker Carlson was fired, I think in my view, that was the sign of things finally turning. Rupert Murdoch has admitted so many times now on so many media that he knew all this shit was bullshit. He knows Tucker Carlson's a liar. So they got rid of Tucker Carlson and he said, okay, you know what? I made enough money. I'll still keep making money, but we'll stop doing all this thing. That's what it looked like to me. And today was like, nope. They're going further to the right. I was like, that was fucking crazy. And, yeah. All right.
Oh, yeah,
That's
I was
it.
going to
Yeah.
just say we need to put up you need to get a little easel with one of those big sheets like they used in Win, Lose, and Draw. Am I dating myself now for game shows on TV? Anyway, you need to get one of those with a big paper on there and the big black pen. And we need to make it 2 columns like Biden and Trump. And then let's go through some of these policies and let's see which one actually is more dictatorial than the other one. Because I as much as I dislike the Biden administration, I don't think they've been as bad as Trump, and I don't think they're nearly as dictatorial as Trump acted. I genuinely am just going to start calling him the Padawan Pinochet because, he tried so many of the things that Pinochet actually implemented, and he tried to do them all.
The Padawan Pinochet, I love that. Trump, I think Trump really should. We're going to, on my website when Trump was running, I refused to call him president. I said, I will not call him president. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It wasn't that I was trying to be petty or anything. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So we had to have a vote for what he was. So I put 4 options for what we could call him and what I would refer to him going forward. That it had to be an honorific because he had earned an honorific as much as but it had to be one that, in my view, was appropriate. So I put up my 4 top options, and the one that won was my personal favorite, Pussy Grabber in Chief. And for a while, that's what I called him. I try not to call him that on my YouTube channel because we get demonetized pretty quickly. This one's already been demonetized 7 ways till Sunday. Probably started with you and the whole. I was looking for my phone earlier because I was like, I know YouTube is just trying to get a hold of me, but I think I'm going to go from that one to Pinochet Pinochet or Pinochet Padawan. Was that it?
Yeah, either way works.
I like it. That's the new one. It's and it's not.
Well, because he did. He tried to do several things, and the thing that pisses me off is, I'm mostly conservative, I know sometimes some people forget about that, and then suddenly I'll say something and it upsets a lot of people because that's a conservative talking point. But it really pissed me off that the people who purport to be conservatives were cheering him on doing some of these things. And I'm like, no. You do not let the president have this kind of power ever. I don't care who he is. Please don't do this. And it really, it really pisses me off when people who purport to care about things like fiscal responsibility, limited government, etc. And they're like, okay, well, you just cheered on a huge power grab, and what in the hell are you doing? So yeah, it really irritates me, and that's one of the things that Trump has got such a hardcore base of support. It just seems like nothing shakes their support of him, and I'm just like, no, please, no, do you not see what you are supporting? And I genuinely don't. I don't think they really care. I think it just goes in one ear and out the other with some of that stuff. I think that they've just like, look, this is a guy who's going to fight for us. He's fighting the quote unquote establishment. And even though there isn't much evidence to support he's actually done any of these things, they've still got it in their mind. And it's like they're just going to dismiss and ignore anything else bad that happens. And they're going to keep supporting him. And I'm like, I don't get this. I just don't get it.
He makes them feel.
It's probably one of the reasons why I hate the Republican Party.
He makes them feel like it's okay to be insert here, racist, this, that. And the reality is, I think there is some blame in the fact where it's sort of like, if we've reached a point, and we've crossed this point a very long time ago, where people are afraid to speak because they think they might say something that would either make them look racist or confirm to people that they're racist. And then they're like, well, I don't want people thinking I'm racist, or maybe I am racist, but I don't even want to think about it. So, and then it just shut down the dialogue. And then everybody feels like, well, I feel like I can't say anything because everyone's going to attack me and say I'm a bad person and this and that. And then if I point that out, they're going to say, well, I really am. And they're just telling it like it is, which is, by the way, a whole bunch of talking points I end up hearing on the right too. So it's funny because the behavior is actually not all that dissimilar in some cases, at least on the extremes. And it's what he basically did was he walked in and said, it's okay to hump the American flag. It's okay to say completely racist things. It's okay to believe completely racist things. It's okay to do completely racist things. Of course it's okay. And that released this dam of all of these people who felt like they couldn't talk about things anymore because they were just going to get shouted down or called all these terrible names. And instead of them now wanting to have conversations about it and to try to address issues, they've said, yeah, it is okay. And now they're more empowered than ever. And that's why talking about these things and letting people talk about them is actually a good thing, because shutting them down doesn't stop the fucking idea. And calling them names doesn't stop the fucking idea. It just encourages them to find other people who agree with them and talk about it in secret. I love the fact that the KKK can protest, because that's how I know how many fucking assholes there are in the community.
Well, and even the anti-theist Seth Andrews. We had Seth Andrews on to talk about the status of discourse in the U.S. And even he pointed out, it's like if you just attack people, it tends to entrench them.
Yeah. And by the way, and that's an argument. I mean, when I really was working as an anti-theist, that was an argument I often made too, which is, if you go up, nobody likes to be humiliated. And it's funny because people will sit there and say, well, then they'll talk to me about education. And I was just like, dude, you do realize I'm a teacher. And when I say that, it's not like, oh, Jay, I'm a fucking certified teacher. I've taught at just about every level of education from 8th grade through college. And I will tell you this, does humiliation work as an educational tool? If by that you mean cognitive behavioral therapy, you mean it can change behaviors, that's true. People who are humiliated usually will do just about anything to avoid whatever it was that humiliated, including maybe learning X, Y, or Z. But it's actually not an educational tool. It doesn't educate people. It creates resentment, and belittling people creates resentment. And even if it's done accidentally, which is another problem, is we all fucking do it. And I think people on the far left have actually, and I'm not going to defend this statement right now. I'm not going to get into it because any defense of it would take a very long time. I hope you feel I'm fair, so I hope you feel that I do have a defense for it. I feel that right now, there are more people represented on the left who have more cause to feel belittled and excommunicated from society, or who feel not empowered by society. That there's a lot more of that on the left. But their backlash to that has fomented a sense of that on the right, and Trump is the embodiment of that. And Trump is the guy who made that okay. And I don't think racism is okay. I don't think it's good. I think it's terrible. But I think how you respond to it is as important as the fact that it exists. Acknowledging that it exists and acknowledging you have to deal with it. How you deal with it is just as important. And dealing with it aggressively and by attacking almost never changes anything. What it does is gets them to shut up, but they still have it. And they're just going to find another way to do it. And that is Trump. We did get another super chat, $10. Thank you very much for the we get demonetized. Half our shows are demonetized.
We got two of them.
We did. Thank you. All right. Half our shows get demonetized, at least half. And if I watch my language a bit more, I know we could have that happen less. We still couldn't stop it because we talk about adult topics, and when you say certain words, there's no. And I'm not gonna start saying the G word or the R word or whatever. But I'm sorry, what?
I didn't go to college, so my math may be a little bit off on this. But if I've got our numbers for super chats correctly, which I also greatly appreciate, people are willing to give money for just a couple of people sitting there and jabbering on the internet. I think it's awesome that people are willing to give money for that. But if I've got my math somewhat close to correct, then it should only take about another 80 years to get me enough money to actually get my college education so that I can know where exactly I'm going.
We'll get you there. We'll get you there. We're going to enroll you in gender studies. I forget what the university is, but we're going to get you, and we're going to pay all the way a PhD all the way through it. We're going to do it.
A PhD.
I just committed to that. I know that wasn't the plan, but we are now committed, I think.
Then you'll have to call me Dr. 𝐒𝐨𝐮𝐬.
We're not going to get you a PhD. We are absolutely under no set of circumstances going to get you a PhD, because there's no way I'm going to let you have that title. I'm going to have to respect you.
I would totally be a doctor of gender studies, 𝐒𝐨𝐮𝐬. I would totally do that.
And I know it's funny. I recently have started going back over some of the works. I had read basically everything Martin Luther King Jr. ever wrote. That was a long time ago. That was going into college. Once I got into college, I really stopped reading, and I still know a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. But it was funny because I was recently diving back into it, and I was really starting to question a lot of it. And I was starting to get into the arguments about, look, it's just when a guy's got a gun, what are you going to do? And I was like, but that's a false equivalency, because that's just not what we're talking about. When it's that we're talking about, there may be a Christian belief, depending on the Christian you ask, that if a guy comes up to you with a gun, you let him shoot you. That's not what I'm saying. And I know that that's what it feels like is happening. And that is, in fact, what is happening to any number of people at any given time across this country. But then again, it was also what was happening back in the 60s. That's not the argument. And it's a convenient, I want to say straw man, but I think straw man usually is used when someone deliberately weakens an argument. But it's a straw man in the sense that it's not addressing what the argument is actually claiming, nor was saying that I wouldn't want to go and engage in World War II. No, there's never been a time I thought World War II could have been solved by anything but the U.S. going in. No. I've got a brain. It works. But, again, if we had been different before World War II, it probably wouldn't have happened. And I haven't met a historian, and I actually posed that without having asked Lance. I didn't ask Lance before the show. And I said, what if we had treated the way we treated Germany at the end of World War II, we had actually done at the end of World War I? Do you think World War II would have happened? He said, no, of course not. And he's right. And if liberals had been a little more respectful of conservatives, despite the fact that, in your view, they're racist or this or that, they certainly are in many cases, in my view, too. I'm not saying I disagree. If you can find a way to respect them and see the humanity first, even if that doesn't change their minds, it doesn't convince them that all liberals are assholes, and to the point where so many of them believe that they think that the only answer left is to stage a coup d'etat in this country. And it seems like that's a huge, long road, but it's not. It's just conversations happening time and time
it's a
again,
huge, long, rocky road down a treacherous cliff. And if you slip and hit the wrong thing, you can end up at the bottom very quickly. And usually everybody ends up dead that way.
I think that's right. I'm going to, my metaphors are, is that a metaphor or a simile? It is yeah, that's a metaphor. But a simile is when you say I don't know. I'm not, you know what? I'm not even going to try it. Anyways, we've had a lot of very supportive people in the
oh yeah, we got to read those.
Right now. I really appreciate it. Let's see.
Stephen Walsh, $10. Then the indictment happened and everybody was suggested to read it. I'm not a number or words guy. I prefer pictures and emojis to translate it. Snide, but can we put the indictment in the vernacular? I'm sure somebody out there has probably done the whole, let's translate this into emoji speak.
Yep.
And then Susan Knifen. So many ways you could say that. For the next time you say words like REJC, I have no idea. I have to say, I'm not sure what that means.
I think I've got it.
See, I need that college education.
Yeah, well, exactly. Anyways, like I said, this has been a bit of a different show. We do this from time to time on In Time, and I lament the fact as well that I was preparing. We're going to do a show specifically on. It's going to focus on the Hillary Clinton emails, because you and I had a discussion about this, and you had talked a little bit about it, and I find a lot of liberals don't know exactly what happened with the emails. They don't really care. They just sit there and say, well, but it's like, when you understand what really happened, it's like, I was never a fan of Hillary. And I have genuine cause to be angry with her, actually, because I worked on a campaign that was opposing her. I met a large number of her upper-level campaign staff. I know who she selected for her campaign. I know why she selected them for her campaign. I know this because I was involved with, at least in Connecticut, many members of the upper levels of the Connecticut staff for Obama for America. And I will tell you something. I didn't like the people she chose. I didn't like why she chose them. I didn't like what they acted like in the field. I didn't like that all the rumors, in my view at least, about them doing things they shouldn't be doing were correct. I have a lot of objections to Hillary, how she runs her campaign, how she runs a whole bunch of things, and so on and so forth. So I am not a Hillary apologist. She didn't delete the fucking email. She didn't do anything illegal. She did do a few things that were really fucking stupid, and she shouldn't have, and probably should have been illegal, but weren't at the time. And it is that, having looked at all the evidence, I've never seen a single defense of why she should be in any honest trouble for any of that stuff that holds water. So we're doing a show that's going to cover that. It's going to, and you can share it too. The idea is we're going to make it short, but we're going to say, here's what happened with that. Here's what happened with this. Here's why, if Trump and people who support him want to come up with but her emails or but Obama's 33 million documents or whatever, these are the facts. You can't argue with the facts. These are facts. This is what we know. If you think something else, great, fine. But this is what happens. So find some other argument. Anyways, I had wanted to get that done tonight. It ain't going to happen. But I appreciate all of you, our audience, joining us and hanging out. We've had a steady high numbers for the whole time, and I appreciate it. And most of it was all off the cuff and shooting the shit, and so you guys were very patient with us. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you letting us have that conversation. Xander, I just called you up and said, "Hey, you want to stream?" I was like, you're like, sure. What happened? What's breaking news? I was like, Fox said something I didn't like, and you're like, and I was just like, yeah, I just want to talk about it. And what they say is like, I'll tell you when we get there. so thank you, Xander, for coming. I appreciate it.
The joys of having your own channel. I mean, I guess I could do the same thing. I mean, I technically do have a channel on YouTube. I uploaded a couple of short videos just to see how it worked of some of the storms that I had driven through. So I suppose, and for some reason I can live stream on my channel. I was kind of shocked to find that out.
I'm a little upset.
I could do this too. Well, it took me a while. I've had my channel for a while. I just have never really done anything with it. It actually has, last I counted, I think it has like 16 subscribers, and I'm like, I don't understand why anybody would subscribe to this, but okay, I guess. So I could theoretically, if this is bugging me and I want to rant at it, but it's kind of hard when it's like I have zero way of inviting anybody else to, rant with me unless they're actually sitting next to me. So it doesn't do me a lot of good to rant into the void, because it's like I don't get any of the feedback that I'm looking for when I'm trying to verbally process. So you call it up, it's like, are you up? Well, I am now.
I hope you don't have to get up early tomorrow.
I want to talk this. Okay.
Yeah, I did.
No, I wasn't asleep. I was awake. I'm on the West Coast, so
you're just giving me shit. Thanks. I appreciate that. I was sitting there going like, I got to talk. Oh man, Nick, I had a meeting that I had to do. I got to get up early tomorrow, but you know what, Nick, for you, because you're a bud, anytime.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's exactly what's happening. I'm supposed to be up. Supposed to be up at the office at 6 a.m. and it's like you sent me. It's like I dropped everything, man. I was in the middle of delivering my load, and I was like, nope, got to pull over and park because Nick needs me.
Well, you see, that's so now everyone who was always just like, wow, Nick really gives Xander a lot of shit, and he's so quiet for most of this. You see, he does it too. I'm telling you, it's self-defense, man. He's really mean to me.
Hey,
seriously,
the best defense is a great offense.
Exactly.
Mr. Miyagi said so.
Well, in that case,
he said best defense was no be there.
Oh yeah, he said that. So if the best defense is a good offense, you must be the most defensive person I've ever met, because you offend everybody. But thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate you guys in the live chat, and we've got a couple of regular shows planned and scheduled starting tomorrow, so we hope you will join us for that. And once again, thank you all for coming. One thing I am going to do real quick before we go. Okay, yeah, got that set up. All right, and we will... Yep. All right. That's good. So thanks again. And we will see you all tomorrow, and we'll be resuming our regularly scheduled program. And we're going to try to do a few more shows with like some real lawyers or people who know what they're talking about. And we'll break down what's going on with the Trump. I'm glad we got a brief chance to chat about where Trump's in danger. I mean, these are bad, and he's facing some tough. This is going to be bad for him, but I think he's got a much worse one coming up in Georgia. So. It's going to get worse for him, and we'll see how people respond. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a good night.